There is the possibility of a few severe storms later on early next week. Taylor Plott and myself will get in there and discuss all of that with you guys on this edition of The Forecast with Stingray and TP. Welcome inside another exciting edition of The Forecast with Stingray and TP. And let me go on ahead and bring up my co-host, Taylor Plott. Taylor, how are you doing this evening?
I'm pretty good, Stephen. Happy birthday to you, by the way.
Thank you, bud. Thank you. And doing a little bit of show on my birthday, and we got a lot to talk about. And as a matter of fact, we actually have a little bit of rain moving in.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go on ahead and show people the radar real quick and let you run over and tell people what they can expect over the next 24 to 36 hours.
So we got some showers that are moving across the area right now as Stephen pulls the radar up. There's nothing really too heavy out there to speak of. There is a little bit of some moderate rain moving in from Mississippi and even parts of western Tennessee into parts of northern and central Alabama. So it's really just a kind of a light to moderate steady rain at times.
Yes.
So if you are out and about doing things this evening, you definitely want that umbrella handy and that maybe a rain jacket on too. It's a little bit chilly outside as well, so you need a jacket anyway. After this really moves through, we're gonna get a break a little bit tomorrow, and then later on in the day tomorrow, I mean a little bit of a break probably tomorrow morning, and the radar not really wanting to pop up.
Now we have the radar. So go ahead and redo it, my friend.
All right, so yeah, we got rain moving across the area. There's really nothing too heavy. There's no storms to even speak of this evening, which is good. There we go, as it pops on up. So you're seeing a little bit some moderate rainfall getting into places like Florence, up towards Killen, maybe even towards Rogersville over there in Lauderdale County. And then a batch moving in across northern Mississippi, Boonville, Ripley, Holly Springs. You're seeing some moderate rain right now. And this will just continue to spread across the area over the next several hours into the overnight and into tomorrow morning. But as we get into tomorrow morning, I'm actually looking at one of the model runs right on the screen next to me. We'll start to get a little bit of a break, and then we'll have more rain start to move in, and then we'll get an additional break later on in the day. And then all that kind of actually just slides down to the parts of central and southern Alabama is kind of a weak frontal boundary. Yes. Kind of drapes across the area, and an area low pressure kind of skirts its way across the center part of the state. So it's not your severe weather setup by any means, but it is a decent setup to seeing rainfall and maybe a little bit of some heavier rainfall coming in tomorrow as that low pressure moves on across the central part of the state. So good news, we're not dealing with storms, but if you have any plans tonight, even tomorrow, you're going to need the rain jacket and that umbrella handy.
And it's also a pretty chilly rain because I'm sitting right here at 50 degrees with rain falling. So that's pretty chilly, even for January standards, man.
It is. And you know what? If I can actually pull up a sounder real quick, you actually make a good point. And I wanted to see what the sounding data might look like. I wouldn't be completely surprised as we get into tonight, like late tonight, that there could be the very northern fringe of
Mhm.
the rainfall. I'm talking about more than likely up into Tennessee, that you could see maybe a couple of snowflakes mixing in, maybe some graupel.
Yes.
But this isn't a winter setup. The
Right.
low's too far north, so you're getting a lot more warmer air being pushed over what we have in the cooler air mass. So you're melting altitude up in the atmosphere is around like 12,000 feet. So above that, if there's any rain falling or if there's any precipitation, it's snow. But below 12,000 feet, it's all rain. But
Yeah.
you might see a little bit of snowflakes or some graupel mixing in on the far northern sides of the what we call the precipitation shield, just that big area of rain
Yeah.
up into the Tennessee area. But for us, it's just cold rain.
Right. Well, let's go on ahead and discuss a little bit about the system coming up this upcoming weekend and into the early part of next week, because that actually has caught our eye.
It has. I've been watching this, and we all have in the weather community. We've been keeping our eye on this for the past. I would say at least a few days. We started seeing hints of maybe some more active weather, talking about more stormy potential earlier on this week, or about Monday-ish. We started seeing the European model start to show a more ominous look uh, for Monday. And what we're looking at here, this is what we call the SIPS analogs. So what the analogs are is it takes into account all the historical data that we have available on storm systems. So it takes into account where the low pressure system ended up, what the temperatures were, Cape values, instability, wind shear, all that stuff. And so when you have the model runs that are going on now, it gets ingested into these analog systems, and then they look at it, and it's like they'll see, okay, well, this has 15 similar setups that has happened in the past. And in
Yeah.
those 15 setups, this happened. And so that's where we get the analogs. So what we're looking at here is this is for Saturday night into Sunday night. And this doesn't mean it's going to last that long. It's just, if you see on the bottom there, it says the 24-hour probability of severe weather. So that is basically from, in this case, with the model guidance, it's from 6 o'clock Saturday night to 6 o'clock Sunday night.
Yes.
So you're getting that big area to look at in the analogs. And what it's showing is you're going to start getting the potential for some stronger to severe storms over across parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, maybe even parts of Texas. And that's not saying that this will happen, but it's an idea that this setup that we look like could be happening this weekend into early next week. In the past,
Yes.
multiple times in the past, it has produced some severe weather. It doesn't have to be significant, but it has at least produced some severe weather. So when you see that little 30% circled area, that just means that based on all the analogs put together, and at least according to, this is using the GEFS, this is
Yes.
the GFS ensembles, what we talked about with the snow a couple of episodes ago. It's using the same thing to see a severe weather potential. And based on those ensembles and the analogs, you're starting to get the more of a 30%, more of a medium range
Mhm.
potential for some severe weather across that area.
Yes. And you see there also the 15% rain goes on into far west Alabama, places like I would say Aliceville, Reform, Gordo, right there, right on the Mississippi state line there.
Yeah, and that's going to be, it's the same thing as a storm prediction center outlook, where
Yes.
it ranges from 7 a.m. in the morning until 7 a.m. the next day. So when you start getting that eastern fringe, at least in this case, it's the storms are moving in that general direction. And then when the analog data comes in the next day, as you show in the next slide,
Yep.
then you start seeing that bigger picture. And so this is going to be kind of overlapping from Sunday night into Monday night. So this is as the storms, as the model sees it, coming across Louisiana and Mississippi, and then eventually making its way
across
into
Alabama.
parts of Georgia, and yeah, and in Alabama. Now, one thing I will point out here is, remember, this is using the GFS ensemble, so it's not taking into account other models like the European model or the Canadian. And one of the things that I have been noticing with the GFS model, which we'll show here in just a little bit, is it has a stormy look with it.
Yes.
For sure, the dew points and the instability is definitely there with the GFS model, but the overall evolution of the system, it doesn't spell a big significant severe weather event by any means. The European and the Canadian, on the other hand, are more favorable looking for some more significant storms than the GFS has. So that's just to keep in mind that that analog data is using just the GFS ensembles. So you have the other models out there to look at, but just based on that and analog data, it still gives us a pretty decent idea on, okay, are we going to be dealing with the potential for some stronger storms? And it does look like that's going to be the case.
I'm just pulling up one thing real quick, so go ahead and talk, and I'll pull the models back up here in just a second.
And that's going to again, that's going to be for Monday night. That'll at least be for the Alabama time frame. And again, things can change, but the idea has been pretty consistent that we could be seeing at least some storms. I think it's a good bet we'll see thunderstorms at least. I think that's a pretty set on bet. But as for any severe weather, that still remains to be seen. But the signal that we're seeing, especially in the analogs and some of the other models, this definitely does bear watching. We're getting into a pattern that it at first it looked like it was going to favor a potential, not like a winter storm, but at least some winter weather potential with it, which doesn't have to be the case, like I've been saying for several times. But on the flip side, it could easily switch into something that it could be more severe weather oriented. That's looks like what we're going to be getting at for late this weekend into early next week. And then looking beyond that, which we'll get to later on in the show, there is still that hope that there could be some winter weather somewhere in the south later on in either in the late part of January. We're talking about the very, very end of January, like 28th, 29th, 30th time frame, and then getting into February, because that's when the big troughing in the eastern part of the United States looks to be setting up. But for now, it looks like we're getting into that warmer trend of things, and that could spell some storms.
So let's go on ahead and look at the GFS for the first one. All right, so let's give me just a second. Okay, I had to make it bigger. All right, so here is the European actually on noon Monday.
Right, and that low pressure system, as you see, is in a good spot for stormy potential. The image or the model image, you don't have it, but the model image before this, the low pressure moves from parts of Missouri and Arkansas and then up to the north. But this is when the bulk of the storms would be moving into eastern parts of Mississippi and parts of Alabama. And you notice how it's not really blown up. There's really not many bright colors down across the state. And what that shows me, if you take this face value, which you don't when you're doing forecasting, but just for a example standpoint, if you take this face value, what that shows is when it had a better line of showers and storms a few hours before this. And again, this is noon Monday according to the Euro. And so what's that showing is, as it gets into the morning hours and then up to noon, we see the line and storms weakening, and then noon and then into the evening, those look to flare up once again. So if you took that at face value, that's what it's showing, is that you should have a weakening line of storms, maybe some showers and storms in front of the line. They would weaken because you're losing daytime heating, and then as you get into the day on Monday, they should start to pop back up a little bit more. And that's typical for these type of events that move in during the nighttime. You'll have a blow up of showers and storms across parts of eastern Texas into Louisiana, Arkansas during the daytime, and then they'll track its way into western Mississippi. And then once it gets to Mississippi, the sun goes down, and you start getting the overnight period. And they move through the state during the overnight period. And they start to weaken because they lose that fuel. And then wherever they're at, when the sun comes back up and get the daytime heating again, then they start to flare back up. So that looks like we could be dealing with one of those situations. But again, that's just one model, and it does have that more of that stormy look. But the GFS, on the other hand, you'll see it looks completely different. And this is the same time. This is not a different time or a different day. This is the model run for the GFS on Monday at noon. And you notice how it is a lot different than the European model. So that's what gives us this. There's a lot of uneasiness in the models. They're not agreeing with each other. And so what the GFS shows is really and truly, when you get down to into the finer details of this model run, is you actually have two areas of low pressure that end up developing. One of them is where you see that L located around Texarkana right there on noon Monday. The other area of low pressure is hiding out right in parts of northern Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, that more of that little triple point area, that Tennessee area right there. There is a small area of low pressure that gets going there, at least according to the GFS. But when you look at this as a whole, it really just looks more like an open wave event with two small areas of low pressure. And if those were oriented a lot better, then that would be dealing with a severe weather event, meaning that you have one area of low pressure off to the north in Michigan, and then you have another area of low pressure across Arkansas and Tennessee. That would be a much better setup if the GFS had that regarding storms. But one thing that this does show is that there will be enough dew points and instability for thunder. And the wind fields do look to be there in the GFS for some stronger storms. And that's why you go into the GFS ensembles. That's why they're kicking off these analogs that are saying, hey, well, this actually produced some stronger storms, and it's starting to highlight that region. So still, even with this model run of the GFS, and again, this is the 12Z run, so this was earlier on this morning, is you're still looking at a stormy setup, but it's a lot messier, and it's a lot less pronounced and eye-popping, if you will, for us in the weather field. It doesn't look like a big severe weather risk. But again, that's just the GFS's point of view. Now the Canadian's more in line with the European. But one of the things that the Canadian is showing, and the GFS actually hinted at this and still hints at it a little bit, is that we could be dealing with a cap involved, meaning there's warm air above the surface. And so we remember all what the cap did on New Year's Eve when we had that severe weather threat present across Louisiana, Mississippi, and even into parts of Alabama. It completely killed it off. So it looks like a cap could be in play on Monday, and maybe even into parts of Sunday further off to the west. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. One of the things that I've noticed in some of the model data is that it looks like you're going to be getting a slightly elevated warmer layer aloft.
I'm going to pull up real quick the latest data and see what the difference is. So that's the reason I left for a second.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see what the difference was between this one and the one that's coming out here pretty soon.
Yeah, we got the 18Z came out about 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I know you'll pull it up so we can show everybody. It still has that more of that wave look, like it showed in the 12Z run. So it's still holding on to that idea right now. And so what we'll watch over the next coming days, because we got a lot of time to watch this, and what we'll find out in the next coming days is how the models finally come to a solution as to what they think will actually transpire with this system. And I'll go ahead and say this, based on how the trough looks like it should be coming in, and how the overall dynamics and thermodynamics look to be setting up, I would favor just a little bit towards more of a European model solution. I'm not saying that it's going to be a full blown severe weather outbreak by any means, but just the way that the trough looks like it's coming in, I would take a look at the GFS right here. I would think that the low pressure system that it shows across Texarkana would be just a tad bit more to the north and to the east across parts of around Arkansas and maybe Memphis, as just the way that it looks like it should move in. It's just one of those things that you just kind of look at and you realize that it looks like it should go in this direction. And the forecast discussions from some of the local offices here in Alabama, talking about Birmingham and Huntsville, have kind of hinted at that it looks taking more of a blend model look, looking at all of them combined. It looks like it should be more across the Arkansas area than it is the Texas area, like the GFS is showing it. Here's the Canadian model again on noon on Monday, and you notice how the darker colors, the heavier rain and storms, are shunted off to the north and to the west. But you notice the shower activity, the lighter green that it has across parts of Alabama and Mississippi. When you click on a sounding there with this model, it shows that there's some warmer air to deal with aloft. So you're dealing with a lot of just low top showers, maybe not even some thunder involved if this actually came to be. But still, you look at just the overall look of it, and you see that the air low pressure, yeah, it's off to the north, and it is maybe a little bit further to the north and to the east than you would want it to be. But there's still a nice trough digging in. There's still a lot of wind shear to work with. The dew points are up in the lower 60s, even some mid 60s across parts of southern Mississippi and south and central Alabama. So just the bigger picture view, that still would be a strong storm look.
And you notice in all three of these, you can see all three of these, there is that secondary low pressure back here over Las Vegas, Nevada. And that would be our next weather maker after this one exits.
Yes, that trough digging in, that's going to be kicking off some mountain snow across parts of Utah, Arizona, Flagstaff, Arizona should be getting some snow out of that one. And yeah, once that starts to kick on out into the plains, you'll probably get another area low pressure that develops somewhere in the vicinity of that system. And it doesn't really look like it would be much of a big weather maker, because what the models are suggesting is that after this moves in, we're dealing with a lot more drier air moving in. And so anything that moves in behind that, there's really not a lot of moisture recovery ahead of it to deal with some more storms. And I can quickly look at this on one of the side monitors I have, and one of the things it's showing is that if anything, it'll be more dealing with maybe some snow across the southern Appalachians, meaning across parts of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, a low pressure system moving down there, which would be something we would have to watch for here in case you get that a Gulf low set up. So that would be something that we would have to keep an eye on, and again, that would be after this system.
So let's take a look at the dew points, because that is another issue that determines if we're going to have severe weather or not. And both of those have dew points way up there. This one right here on the Euro has dew points in the mid 60s on noon Monday, and even some 70s way down there in the Gulf.
Yeah, and of course, as you get further down to the Gulf Coast, you're going to have those higher dew points, and thus you'll probably have some stronger storm potential down there. But what the Euro is showing, and again, along with where the low pressure system is, at least according to the Euro and these dew points, that would spell some stormy trouble
Yeah.
across what we call the warm sector. That's where you see the dew points in the 60s and even up to the 70s further towards the coast. This would definitely have the instability present. But one of the other factors is what the actual air temperature will be along with these dew points. So the higher air temperature you get, the more instability you will have. So for instance, if you have a temperature of about 70 degrees and you have a dew point of about 65, you're probably looking at close to 1,000 joules of CAPE, which is very sufficient for strong to severe storms. But on
Yes.
the flip side, if you start lowering those values, remember the cutoff for severe weather, really just the guideline. You can get it below it. We've actually seen that a quick tornado that happened in Hoover several weeks ago happened with the dew point. It looked like it was around 57, I
Yes.
believe, maybe a little bit, maybe a tad bit lower than that. But one of the cutoff, the general guideline is in order to have severe weather, you need a dew point of 58 or greater. Really and truly, down here in Alabama, you want that dew point to be 60 or greater. And so once you get the temperatures and dew points down to that lower end, if you have certain things that happen aloft, they can offset it. But just as a general guideline, the way the lapse rates work and all that stuff, if you have a temperature of about 63 degrees and a dew point of about 61, like some of these far northern areas are showing, then your CAPE's going to be very, very meager. You're only talking about maybe 200 to 300 joules of CAPE. But again, there's some other factors that can enhance that. You can have a air temperature of 63 degrees and a dew point of 62, but about 8,000 feet above you, the temperature's already below freezing, and that would be very, very strong lapse rates. And then actually, your instability would be much higher. You would be probably more towards like 700 or 800 in that case. So again, there's some other factors in there, but just as a guideline, looking kind of like a standard, if you will, that's where the instability would be. So you would want, if I'm wanting to see something that is really screaming, this is going to be a big severe weather event, those dew points have to be in the mid to upper 60s. They would have to be 67, 68, and an air temperature in the lower to maybe mid 70s. That would have a lot of instability to work with, along with the wind shear in place. So it looks like what would be happening is it would be more of your typical wintertime setup with the high shear and low instability, that low CAPE,
Yep.
like we always see during this time of year. But just the fact that the dew points look to be in a much more broader zone with this system and how some of the other things are setting up, that it definitely needs to be watched for sure.
Now that of course is the Euro. Let's look at the GFS, and it looks totally different.
It
You know,
does.
there's not really that plume of moisture that you have on this one right here. It's not really there. It's just kind of suppressed a little bit.
It is. You're right. It doesn't look like a plume. It looks more like it's like almost like a wave that just kind of stopped
Yes.
across here. You don't get this big jut out of dew points up into Tennessee. This is more
Right.
kind of a laid out, stretched out zone, and that's just due to the fact that you have these two areas of low pressure that are moving almost parallel to the Gulf Coast, a little bit further to the north. They're moving more west to east than you have that other area of low pressure that's up towards the Boot Hill, Missouri. So this would have the instability present for sure. You would still have instability values probably around 500 to 800 across some areas here across the southeast, especially places, at least according to this model run, across parts of Louisiana and Arkansas. But just because the way the areas of low pressure set up according to the GFS, really and truly all you would look at with this is, yeah, there will probably be some stronger storms in the mix with the warm front that's moving through. You could have some open sector scattered storms that develop, but the storm mode would probably be messy, and you would just deal with maybe some damaging winds, maybe a couple of tornadoes possible with that
Yeah.
setup, but it doesn't. The GFS doesn't scream big time severe threat.
Yes.
But again, that's just the one GFS run. And the GFS ensembles, which of course we know is a lot more model runs with a lot different parameters. They start different. They have little tweaks here and there, and so they could have more severe weather looks in them than just that GFS. But yeah, there's a Canadian. So based on the fact that you have at least two models that show a more of a severe weather look. That's why the trend right now is that you could be dealing with some stormy weather coming up Sunday night and into parts of Monday night as well across the southeast. It's just something we'll have to watch. It's definitely not set in stone by any means, but this is definitely one of the more ominous looking systems that we've had in a while.
Definitely, and especially when you see something like this with a dew point of like 64 and approaching 65 here in January, that's pretty problematic.
Right, and just that even if it is on that lower threshold of things, it's the wintertime. If we end up getting dew points in the 70s and temperatures in the mid to upper 70s, then that is one wicked system that
Yes,
comes in. Usually we just deal with dew points in the lower 60s, that very meager instability. Everything's mainly driven off of the wind shear. That's your typical wintertime setup. And so that's what we would more than likely be dealing with on Sunday night to Monday. Now that doesn't mean that it's not going to produce severe weather. I mean, we've had high shear low cape setups dozens of times over the past several years across the southeast. You can get multiple tornadoes from them. It's a different animal than what you deal with in the springtime.
so here is the probability looking from later on in the month until we get from next Wednesday on. And as you can see here, above average temperatures, basically going from the Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi border off to the west. And then, of course, the below average coming right basically down from basically Jefferson County, Birmingham, and to about Duncanville, and points off to the east.
Yeah, and this is going to be with that we've been talking about when the polar vortex starts to split off, and so we're starting to get into that time frame where we can start to kind of nail down who could be impacted more with some colder temperatures coming up. And it's been shifting around a little bit, and the idea is still it would be the East Coast or eastern
Yes.
parts of the United States, and you would get more ridging, which would mean warmer temperatures across parts of the plains and even parts of the western U.S. And so where you see the white areas, that just means that the temperatures are just normal. The anomalies come in with where the colors are. So really and truly, it looks like the troughing will happen on the not really far eastern parts of the U.S., but it will be the eastern U.S. and it would
Yes.
still impact us here across parts of the South. Could this spell maybe a winter thing to watch? It could. The pattern that anytime you deal with a pattern that involves a lot more colder air moving in, there's always that higher chance because you're dealing with the colder temperatures moving in. So it's just something we'll have to watch, and you'll definitely have warmer temperatures off to the plains. And so sometimes when you start to see this look, you start actually looking more stormy potential, especially across the plains, and that would be into parts of our area as well. So with this type of look, according to the Climate Prediction Center, you would start to see maybe more storms than you would winter weather, but that doesn't discount the fact that you could have some winter stuff that happens.
So let's go on ahead now and take a look at the precipitation. And that is not good for us here in the South as it is below average.
Yeah, but also take in mind that we aren't really in our wettest parts of the year by any means. Usually in the time of year that we have, it is a little bit more dry because this is where we deal with our colder temperatures, and that usually means much more colder shots coming in, and so that ushers in some drier air. So while we are looking at below average for this time of year, it's still below average from when we actually don't really see a lot of stuff that happens right now. And again, that doesn't mean that it won't happen, but what that tells me is that we're probably going to be definitely getting into a drier stretch. There'll be a lot more drier days than wetter days across the area from January 27th to February 2nd. But that doesn't mean we won't see any precipitation. We will, but it is definitely a lot less than what we're usually seeing this time of year.
So that pretty much goes on ahead and wraps up everything. Hopefully, we can get a better handle on the severe weather risk or potential risk of severe weather, tomorrow and then, of course, this weekend.
And we will when we start getting more model data to come in. You get closer to the event, so things start to really kind of like just narrow down like they usually do. They don't always do that. I've definitely seen events down here where every model still had a completely different solution on the day of, and so you had a. I actually remember one day in particular. I can't remember what year it was or what day it was, but we had an enhanced risk, and it was actually a very conditional enhanced risk, meaning that it becomes a enhanced type threat if these certain conditions actually pan out. And
Yes.
so we went into that day, and I literally posted on social media. I said, you need to be on the lookout for severe weather today, and I actually put in there, but I honestly don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
And I mean, you can get that. Will this be one of those scenarios? I don't know. It's very unlikely that it does. It's very rare to actually go into an event the day of, and all the models still have a completely different idea in place. So yeah, once we get into this weekend and we start getting that higher resolution data coming in, we should have a lot better idea on how things will pan out, whether this would just be a line of storms, we're dealing with multiple waves of showers and storms, could there be supercells, line segments, clusters, we start getting to all those fancy details, and then we actually can start to determine, okay, well, what threats are we looking at? We can give you a general area of where to look for things. That's what we're doing now. That's where the analog data and the everything is highlighting. Hey, look out in this zone as we get closer to the event. It looks like it's going to be this area that we'll have to watch. And then once we start getting into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we start saying, okay, well, it's actually these areas, these areas, these areas. Start getting more local across the area. That's where we can start giving you timelines of, okay, well, this area looking at, say, 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock and stuff like that. So right now we're just in that acknowledging that there's a signal in the models that there could be some storms to deal with Sunday into Monday. How strong, we don't really know, but the setup looks to favor a stronger storm potential.
So basically, right now, we're just on a kind of wait and watch basis on the next set of model runs
Yeah.
that come out.
Yeah, what we're waiting on next would be, obviously the GFS has its certain idea that's completely different than what the European and even Canadian show. So then you start looking at, okay, well, when will the models start to actually get into a better agreement, and what agreement will that be? It could be the European model starting to switch to the GFS solution. It could be the GFS starting to switch to the European solution, or you kind of get a mesh in between, and that starts showing up. I think what you'll probably have is a little bit of a mesh in between. I think the European model is, obviously it's the more reliable model that we have, but I think its idea is a little bit more in line with how this evolution should go coming up on Sunday into Monday. But yeah, it's just, yeah, wait and see. We start to keep getting those model datas in, and just see how things start to line up. And then when we get the high resolution, like the NAM, even the long range HER that goes out 2 days, you start to actually fine tune things. You start seeing a little bit more.
Well, Taylor, I think that's going to wrap up this edition of the Stingray, the forecast with Stingray and TP. Maybe if we do have a severe weather set up, maybe we can do another show on Sunday.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfectly good idea. Once we get the better models and model data coming in, Sunday we'll have a much better idea of how things could pan out.
All right, guys. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed this episode, and we hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will be updating you guys on the weather just in case we do have that chance of seeing a little bit of severe weather to start off early next week. Hope you guys have a great week, and as always, God bless.
See you guys.